From KXOT917 Tacoma, I'm Dominic Black. Now, if you travel anywhere in the world, you start to realize that trade's one of the very basic, it's one of the very basic parts of human behavior. I mean, everywhere you go, people are buying and selling stuff. It's just an intrinsic part of being human, it seems. Artist Don Fells explores this notion in his new show at the Tacoma Art Museum. In fact, the show's called What is Trade? And it's a collaboration with signboard painters from South India. And we'll get to the signboard painters in a minute, but also with myself and Don are two of Tacoma's great artists, Tom Llewellyn and Lance Kagi, of Tacoma's beautiful Angle. For those listening north of Federal Way who might be less familiar with their work, beautiful Angle's I was trying to think of a phrase to describe your guys' work. I just thought it's like a visual voice of Tacoma. Does that work for you guys?
That's fine, yeah. Guerrilla art and a viewpoint that hopefully gets people talking.
Yeah, I mean, specifically it's letterpress posters that we hang out on the street, but yeah, I agree with everything else you said.
Don, first of all, can you explain to me a little bit about how this series of pieces came about?
How did it come about? It came about with a wacky idea I had to go to India and work with billboard painters there because I really liked the kind of work they did. What happened in the process was they went out of business before I got there, or as I got there, really. It really happened while I was there the first time in 2003. And it happened almost overnight. So I landed in 2003, worked with one billboard painter, and when I came back in 2004, they were all out of work.
And what happened to drive them out of work?
Trade from right here, actually. Microsoft programs, Adobe programs, have replaced them with vinyl printout things just like we have here. When I moved to Seattle in the early 70s, guys were still going up and painting billboards here. And that's long gone. Mm-hmm. Well, it's shorter gone in India. And it's a bigger deal in India because signs are everywhere in India, and I should just explain why, because it's not necessarily self-evident. So India is a country of maybe 15 major languages, maybe 300 or 400 dialects. It's also a country, this is changing, but a country predominantly of non-readers. In some areas, where I worked in Kochi in Kerala, there's a 98% literacy, which is actually higher than here. But generally, in parts of India, there are a lot of people who don't read. So you had a problem. If you wanted to sell something, whatever, pick something, gasoline for a car, you needed to have a picture of it because if you put a word up, A, the word might not be the language that the person reads, and B, they may not read any language. So signs have been an integral part of street culture in India for 150 years, 200 years. So it's not quite the same as here. I mean, it's a big deal that they've gone out of business. So.
Why did you want to work with signboard painters from India particularly? What was drawing you to that?
Okay, and it's all long stories. Because Vasco da Gama, which is the subject of this particular exhibition, 500 years ago in 1498, he made what is considered by most scholars to be the pivotal connection between India and the rest of the world. There had been trade, obviously, going on with India for thousands of years. But it was all one guy or two guys in a boat going to get stuff. India produced the major spices. That spice was worth more than gold 500 years ago, literally. So the guys from Venice and Genoa in Italy controlled the distribution of those spices in Europe, for which they took a big cut and made them wealthy. Portugal, which was then the poorest country in all of Europe, had big desires to get some money. And so there was a guy named Prince Henry the Navigator, who was the brother of the king of Portugal, and he had this big idea that if he could train navigators and sailors, they could go directly from Europe to India, capture the Indian spice trade with no middlemen, and Portugal would be rich. That's exactly what happened, actually. So I thought, being kind of a guy who connects A to B to C, I thought, okay, if Vasco da Gama went to India and started this whole mess, if I'm interested in trade, which I've been interested in for almost 20 years, I had to go there too. Okay. And if I'm going there and I'm a visual guy and I'm a painter, I had to work with painters who are painting stuff there. So that's kind of how it all happened. I went there and I thought, I'll tell the story with these guys.
So then you end up, I mean, it seems to me the ironic thing about it is that you end up, you know, you have this interest in trade and you go there and then you find these guys who lost their jobs because of the subject you went there for.
Right. But actually, for me, it made my project way better. For them, it's a miserable thing. And I, certainly don't want to say that I went there to benefit from their misery. But the beauty of it is I, first of all, was able to give them work, something they didn't have. Second of all, because they're no longer working for companies, they were much freer to express their own opinions because no one could fire them. So what I did was I said, okay, guys, let's make these paintings, and I want you to interject your opinions in this. And they were trained totally the opposite. They were commercial painters, so some guy hires them to paint a picture of a Ford,
Toyota or
a Toyota. It better look like a Toyota, not a Subaru. I'm saying to them, I don't care if it looks like a Toyota. What would you like it to look like? And in the beginning, all they did was fight with me. They said, but we can't do that. Mm-hmm. And I said, sure you can. And so over time, and this is going on for 5 years, they got totally into it. So maybe I can give you an example from this piece right here.
Okay, so what we're looking at now is the sort of opening image that greets us as you come into the gallery, and across the top is written, "The West has an appetite for the taste of the East." Lance or Tom, what's your impression of this image? How would you describe that?
The open mouth of the close-up of the world being tasted is just brilliant. I think it's completely in your face.
Yeah, and so you're looking at this huge close-up. The whole thing is just almost like a Rolling Stone's mouth, but inside, instead of a tongue, as you see the world focused on the Asian continent, specifically India, and so I mean it seems like there's some clear kind of double meanings there, that it's being eaten, it's not just tasted, it's kind of being consumed as well.
I'm at Tacoma Art Museum, and with me is Don Fells, whose new exhibition here called What is Trade is running until January. And also with us are Lance Kagi and Tom Llewellyn of Tacoma's Beautiful Angle. And we're just having a look at some of the key works in this exhibition.
There's this one up here on the kind of adjoining wall that is this huge shot. They're all just really, really big. I mean, these things must be, I don't know, what are they, 15 feet across or something?
12.
So the scale is great because it's also overwhelming. But it's a shot of Vasco da Gama's ship when it's first entering. Where is that, actually?
It used to be called Malabar. It's now called Kerala, which is sort of very, India. Here, we'll look at the mouth map. India comes to a point at the bottom. This is Sri Lanka, that blob down here on the right. And Kerala is that very point on the bottom. Okay. So it's the southwest corner of India. And that's where pepper grew. It's the only place in the whole world that black peppercorns grew. So it wasn't an accident. He went there to get the peppercorns.
So Da Gama's ship is coming in and it's blasting away at what looks like the welcoming party, these little teeny boats coming out to greet it. And this seems like, again, it's kind of part of the same story, right? The thing that I'm kind of wondering about this, because here you have these guys who are trading, and theoretically they're bringing goods to these local people, but let me just go on the attack right away and say, is there a certain aspect of this where you ever felt like Da Gama?
No, it's totally right question. Yeah, in the catalog I write about that. Part of the way I work is to sort of court danger, and I thought that's precisely the right question. I thought I'm in the position of Vasco da Gama because here I am, a Westerner, showing up to take stuff from them. And it is a trade. So I kind of threw myself in that position, figuring that I could stir up all kinds of feelings which would be useful for my project. I like to think that I wasn't Vasco da Gama. I mean, the guys have invited me back 4 times to work with them since, so they seem to like me. But I did put myself willingly in exactly the same position. That is, I'm a white guy showing up in India to take something back to the West. So, no, precisely.
Well, right below the one we just talked about is this one about kind of a curio cabinet of museum pieces. And it strikes me not only for its composition, but its content is very poignant. It reminds me of those old Golden Book encyclopedia covers that are kind of the trompe-l'oeil kind of piece. And it's stunning to me. I wonder kind of I get meaning out of it, but I don't know what was the intent.
What are we looking at in the actual cabinet there?
So there's a lot of various pieces, coral, artifacts from maybe Africa and other colonial areas. There's a skull and some blown glass, and some maybe Chinese porcelain. Quite a range of artifacts.
Yeah, and there is a story, of course, about this. So what happened is Vasco shows up in 1498, and it's a big success. I mean, he comes back with this ship full. He brought 3 ships, 2 of them sunk, 2/3 of the sailors died of scurvy. He still came back with 60 times the profit of what the whole expedition cost, only limping back with 1/3 of what he started with. So there's big money in this, and Portugal did become the richest country in all of Europe based on this trade. Then rich guys in Europe started saying, well, this is cool. Maybe I'd like to collect some things. So they would tell the natural scientists, if you see any big butterflies or nice coral or whatever, I'll pay you for what you can bring me back. So they would bring the stuff back, and the rich guys would put in their house a cabinet of curiosities. That's where it came from, with odd things to show that they had traveled the world.
It really plays into the whole idea of consumerism, I think, and like you think about the Rosetta Stone in the British Museum, that Napoleon found it, and the English stole it from Napoleon and brought it to their safe place to possess
the Elgin
it.
Marbles as well.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It just seems like this is a great thing again, Don, about just the complexities of this. Because something good, I mean, if you assume that museums are good, something good comes out of it, right? But there's some pretty nasty stuff that happens along the way, and it just seems like there's no black and white here. It's hard to say, that it was all bad. That it was just like, okay, you have Vasco comes over, but then, we also get this great connection to the world. The world becomes a smaller place. We get more interconnected. I mean, nowadays you could say, well, maybe Bill Gates is the new Vasco, right? He what he brings back is, technical support, via outsourcing. But then these guys are outsourced by Bill Gates products, right?
Exactly.
So it's this weird, complicated kind of just mess, I guess. But there's some good that comes out of it too, right? I mean, because these guys got some work from you, they get some work from outsourcing jobs, and
I've been working on trade for 20 years. I have points of view, but my point of view is it isn't black and white. There are definitely parts of it that are terrible and continue to be terrible to this day. But it isn't so simple to say it's all bad. And it certainly isn't, you can't say it's all good. Well, this is all about the demise of the billboard painters. So that it says new in the Indian pantheon, and up above is a computer terminal, and down below is a kind of hunky-looking machine that you realize is a printer. And that printer I just took literally right off the internet. I just went on the internet and found printers that print out billboard-sized stuff, and there it was. And it says on the bottom, made in China, Germany, Israel, Korea, USA. They're made in all those countries. And, it's a machine, a billboard-o-matic. None of them have that name. I made up the name. But the essentially, and it's got hands because Indian gods have a lot of arms. So one of the Indian gods' arms is squishing the painter who's painting. It's a little heavy-handed, but, the idea is that
he's kind of bleeding in Technicolor there as well, right? Yeah. And it has the great feature, I always love this, is like back to that kind of idea of like book illustrations of it. It has the big picture is there, and then out of the printer is coming a copy of that of the picture itself, and then within that is another picture, and you can kind of look into it forever, which is just pretty cool. Now, how much of that is your idea directing them, and how much it was the artist?
They totally got into it. I just said just what you said. Well, what if it was, and then they just went for it, and they got really giggly about the whole thing, that they could keep painting. I forget how many of them we ended up with, but there's 5 or 6 versions of it going back in, and that was totally them having a good time.
Did they see this kind of as the enemy, the thing that the beast that caused the demise of their livelihood?
I mean, they know it's interesting. It's called venal there, which seems more vicious. Vinyl, what we call vinyl, is called venal. It just sounds worse. Yeah. But they know.
The fact that there's kind of this spiritual kind of connection with the goddess or god, how does that play into their kind of sensibilities?
Well, I was trying to make the pitch that capitalism and digital versions of it have become the new god in India. And they don't have any trouble. I mean, these guys completely agreed with me. I mean, that the run for money has replaced, in a lot of people's lives, what might have been taken over by spiritual concerns before. I mean, everybody's trying to, in a certain sense, you can't blame them. They're at the bottom of the heap. They want to be at the top of the heap. We're in the middle of the heap, falling down toward the bottom. They want to go up. And so you can't blame them. It's just that it's pretty bumpy along the way. So guys like these guys have lost their livelihood because other guys, as you were saying earlier, are getting the outsourcing jobs. So it's up and down.
Well, Don Fells, Lance Kagi, Tom Llewellyn, thanks so much. It's been fantastic to have you kind of guide me through this work. And Don, you have some more recent work which is opening on Thursday night at the University of Washington in Tacoma.
That's right, and it's literally across the street. So the UWT gallery is right behind Starbucks, and it's work that I did with more or less the same painters. There's a few additions and subtractions, but Surya, for example, was with me. We worked together for all this time, and those are pieces that we did on 2 subsequent visits of mine to India.
And the works here are on show until January the 13th, is that right?
I think so. Yeah, or 18th, middle of January.
Great. Thank you very much, guys.
You.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.